Okay, hi there. So first off, my apologies that my voice is a little rough today. I'm getting over a pretty nasty cold. So I'm going to first talk a little bit about money in this first lecture of the financial sector unit. And that's a good idea for us at this point, close to 7 months into economics, to be able to actually talk about what money is. Initially, when we first talked about money, I said it's really not that important to think about what money is and that sort of thing, because most of our study of economics doesn't really revolve around money. In this unit, though, the financial sector, we are going to be thinking more about money, and so it's a good idea for us to define it. So the simple definition of money is actually that it is what money does. Money is what money does. And so in order to define it, we have to know what it does. And generally, economists would say that if money fulfills the three functions, medium of exchange, unit of account, and store of value, then it's money. So anything that fulfills these three functions, and it has to do all three fairly well, counts as money. So first, let's talk about what is a medium of exchange. Money is a device, an abstraction in some cases, that allows us to transact without the barter system. And so the barter system, just a brief word about that, revolves on something called the double coincidence of wants. In other words, I'm a teacher, and if I want cold medicine, I would have to go to the pharmacist and say, well, do you want me to teach your children economics? Because I would like some cold medicine, and then we can exchange those things. But money allows us to avoid having that double coincidence of that they coincidentally want me to teach their children economics, and I coincidentally want them to give me cold medicine. And so money allows us to bypass that and say that I'm going to go to the store and buy cold medicine and use money to do so. That avoids the problems of the barter system. The second feature or function of money is unit of account. It allows us to basically provide a value for all goods and services. If you think back a couple of units ago, we talked about inflation eroding the value of money as a unit of account, that it makes it really hard for us to determine how valuable something is. And so one of the costs of high inflation is that we can't really easily tell the value of things. A third is the store of value. And so we'd say that money is, at least good money, is something that stores purchasing power. It doesn't spoil, it doesn't die, it doesn't rot. And it's also something where it might be relatively difficult to counterfeit. So these are some traits that we could typically say are true of money, that maybe it's scarce, it's portable, divisible, widely accepted, and uniform. Something about money is that if it is these things, then it generally fulfills those functions. But this is why we can have lots of different kinds of money out there, that different societies for thousands of years have used different products as money. But in general, as long as it fulfills these three functions, then it is money. There are generally, we'd say, two types of money. Commodity money, and that would be money that's given its value from other uses in addition to its use as money. And this could be something like specie coins, which would be basically coins which are themselves valuable. So I have an example of that. Normally I pass this around in class. That's a silver dollar, and so you can see here, and we'll maybe pass this around in class, that it's actually it's a chunk of silver, right? And it's actually money. In addition, there's backed paper currency, and so commodity money would be money that has value, that based on its value is tied to that it can do something else. So like you might be able to make jewelry out of silver or something like that. So paper money can also be backed, and this is called a silver certificate. I know it's a little hard to see here, but in general, it's the idea that if it's given its value from its other uses in addition to money, it's what we call commodity money. So specie coins, or that is, specie just means like metal, basically gold or silver, and paper currency that is backed, in other words, by a certain amount of gold or silver in a vault, that's called commodity money. Now, the money that normally we use in the United States today is what we call fiat money. So just as a couple other examples of what we're talking about here. So here's some others that I'll quickly kind of show you. This is another silver certificate, and you can see that it actually says $10. And what it actually tells us is that this certifies that there is, and I'm reading from the top, this certifies that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America $10 in silver. payable to the bearer on demand. So in other words, this piece of paper, back in the old days, I could go to the U.S. Treasury or to a bank and say, I would like a little bit of silver for this piece of paper. And so it was backed. This piece of paper was backed by that. On the other hand, right, you had at the same time, you had gold certificates. So this would be $10 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. So this is a gold certificate. And here's another silver certificate, right? $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. But then at the same time, we were circulating these things. These are called Federal Reserve notes. When these are actually just fiat money. This just says that there is $5, and that's all this is worth. It's not exchangeable for anything else. And so it's called a Federal Reserve note. Now, nowadays in our economy, all that circulates generally is fiat money. It's given its value by fiat or by dictate. It's that someone has said, thus it is so. It has no other value or use except as money. This could include any non-precious metal coins, so things like, pennies, quarters, that kind of thing, paper currency, but also abstract ledger money. And what that means is just money that exists in a spreadsheet somewhere. Okay. Now, so generally speaking, this is considered to be kind of the norm in nowadays is fiat money. And that's because it allows central banks a lot easier control over the money supply. If you have to rely on commodity money, if there's laws that say that your money has to be backed by gold or silver, for example, then the problem is that it doesn't allow you to manage your money supply. So the problem, right, is that you can't manage your money supply. And that actually is a problem, as we'll find in the coming lectures, that you can't manage the money supply if you use commodity money. Now let's talk about different measures of the money supply. If we talk about money supply, there's some basics of it. There's one way to think about how we count money is we actually count the liquidity of it. And liquidity is a term that kind of just refers to the ease of converting an asset into cash. So for example, if you owned a $500,000 condo, it's not very easy to convert that asset into currency. But if you had a $500,000 in your bank account, then it's relatively more liquid. You could convert it into cash much more easily. And so we have these different numbers, MB, M0, M1, M2, that refer to how easy is it to convert your assets into currency. And these are our measures of the money supply. So the smallest one is this tiny one here, M0, is currency. And just for reference, that's about $2 trillion in U.S. currency is out there. And so there's about $2 trillion US dollars in currency out there. But if we said, you know what, let's add the currency to all the money that's in the checking accounts, or demand deposits is the other way we say that. Demand deposits just means checking accounts. Then there's actually another $2 trillion in people's checking accounts, and those are just as much money as currency, but they're in a bank account, they're in a spreadsheet somewhere. So in total, M1 is about $4 trillion. Now that $4 trillion of that is $2 trillion in currency, that's the M0, plus another $2 trillion or so in checking accounts for a total of $4 trillion. And now we can go even further than that, and we can say, if we took all of the currency and all the demand deposits and we added in all the money in savings accounts and certificates of deposit and money market accounts, which are a fancy way of talking about savings accounts, that's called M2 money. That's actually about $14 trillion. And so if you think about it another way, the amount of money in savings accounts, CDs, and MMAs is $10 trillion. And if you add that to the amount that's in M1, then that's how you get M2. So if you think about it, it's like a nest, right? You have M2, and then inside of that, and it includes M1, and then inside of that is M0. Now, over off to the side, this is called MB, and it stands for monetary base. And this is a special type of the money supply because this is the amount that the government can actually directly control. This is the amount in bank reserves and currency. So the government can actually directly control how much money banks keep in reserves, and it can directly kind of control how much currency there is. There's a total of about $4 trillion of monetary base as well. And so we'd say there's about $2 trillion in bank reserves, there's $2 trillion in currency. If you add those together, M0 and bank reserves, you get $4 trillion in MB. Now, you're not going to need to know the numbers. Let's be clear here. That's not that important. But you will need to know what are the components of M0, M1, M2, and MB. And so you'll be given problems that'll say, currency is this amount and demand deposits is this amount. How much is M1, right? And so you just add those two together and that gives you M1. So this is something that maybe taking a look at some of the practice problems in your book might help a little bit to practice on those. The last thing we're going to talk about with money are things that are related to money or that you can purchase with money. And some of these are money, and these are financial assets. These are non-physical assets. So in other words, not a house or a factory or capital good, but they're something of value. So an asset is something of value. And these are things whose value is derived from a contractual claim. That means that somebody has a claim on it, and it's kind of a legal contract. And these could include things like bank deposits, bonds, or stocks. And some of these are money, but not all of them are. So the very first one we'll just call bank deposits. And bank deposits are money. Bank deposits are money, and they're placed at financial institutions. These types are demand deposits, savings accounts, time deposits. So time deposits is another fancy way of saying a certificate of deposit. So that would be like something up here. Second thing would be something called a loan. Now, a loan is not money. Loan is not money. It's a contractual borrowing in which principal and interest are repaid periodically. And so this is, you borrowed it. It's not actually money in the sense that it doesn't have those same characteristics of money. There's a special type of loan called a bond. And a bond is a type of a loan where there's a repayment of principal that all happens at the end. In other words, I loan you $1,000, and rather than you paying me back $100 a month, which would be maybe like a loan, a bond is one where you repay me the full $1,000 at the end, but you pay a fixed rate of interest throughout the loan. So maybe every month you pay me a little interest, and that's called the coupon rate. The prices of existing bonds actually change inversely when interest rates change, and we're going to return back to that later. But it's a fairly straightforward idea. It's the idea that if I have a bond and it's paying me 5% interest, and it's, let's say, a 5-year bond at 5% interest, and then there's all of a sudden a new bond that comes out at 10% interest, a new 5-year bond at 10% interest, what would that do to the value of my existing bond that's only 5%? Well, it would make the existing bond's value go down. So let me kind of write that out here. If interest rates rise, right, then the price of bonds go down, because we'd say that the value of those old bonds is less because the new bonds are going to pay that new higher interest rate. So the price of the existing bonds is going to go down. And likewise, if interest rates go down in an economy, we'd say that the price of bonds will typically go up. And that's because the bonds that are existing are going to be paying those former interest rates that are now higher than the new bonds are going to be paying. And we could talk more about that one later in class as well. The fourth one here is called a stock. This is a stock, and this is a contract. It's a share of ownership that entitles you to profit. Usually we call that dividends, and the potential for the capital to gain or lose in value if the company changes in value. This is not investment spending, right? Remember, investment spending is when you buy new capital machinery and that kind of thing, new construction, changes in inventory. A stock is just a contractual share of ownership. The fifth thing here, this is called a portfolio of retail loans or other collateralized debt. This is called an asset-backed security. And so there are lots of these out there, but basically an ABS is where you'd combine a bunch of loans or bonds together, and you could actually kind of get one big product out of it. So there's a lot of people that deal in asset-backed securities. They're kind of combinations of loans. And then the sixth thing here is called a mutual fund. Mutual fund. And a mutual fund is a similar idea. It's a portfolio, kind of a combination of stocks, so bonds, or maybe other types of securities, maybe even including asset-backed securities. It's a group of these, and money market accounts are a special type of these that use bank deposits to buy really low-risk, high-quality assets like treasury bonds, things like that. But a mutual fund is just kind of a combination of stocks and bonds and things like that. So generally speaking, we'd say that none of these are money, right? 2 through 6 here are not money, except for these MMAs. Sometimes are money, sometimes money, because we'd say that they're part of M2, and in the sense that if they're a special type of mutual fund that only buys these kind of really low risk short-term assets. But in general, mutual funds are also not money. So hopefully this helps you understand some more of the basic ideas here of money. Money is what money does, and I'll see you next time.